Hello again, everyone. I'm Dr. George Simon, and welcome to another edition of the new Character Matters program. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we've experienced for several decades now, and that affects every single aspect of our lives. And in the current series of podcasts, I'm talking about the more malignant forms of narcissism and the signs to look for. On the last program, I talked about glibness and smugness as two key signs to look for with respect to more malignant forms of narcissism. And today, I'd like to begin a discussion about another characteristic more malignantly narcissistic folks that exists along spectra of both type and degree. And that characteristic is lying. As I mentioned, lying occurs along a spectrum of both type and degree, from mere wishful thinking to outright delusionality. There's a wide spectrum. A pioneering researcher studying the grandiose among criminals came up with a saying as he was talking to character after character. He said, for them, it appears that thinking makes it so. In other words, what they say is reality is for them reality. It makes no difference what others say. It makes no difference how the actual truth might conflict with what they say. For them, thinking truly makes it so. They define reality, and they define it in a way that is comfortable with the view that they would like to have of the world, of themselves, and how they operate in the world. I've written about this topic many times on my blog at drgeorgesimon.com. You can find tens of articles on the subject. And I talk about it in all of my books, too, especially my most recent book, Essentials for the Journey. The most disturbed characters among us have a pathological disregard for the truth, primarily because it represents the ultimate higher power. And the truly grandiose among us will have no part of a power greater than themselves. They can barely even recognize that such powers exist. And if they do recognize that such powers exist, they're adamantly opposed to the notion of being subordinate. They refuse to subordinate themselves to anyone or anything that they perceive as higher. They're the ultimate authority in their own minds. The same researcher that coined the term thinking makes it so also coined the popular phrase, they're truly legends in their own minds. To recognize a more objective truth, other than the truth I want the truth to be, is inherently a subordinate position, recognizing something bigger. And the grandiose among us refuse to do that. Now, traditionally, psychologists and various researchers have thought that this kind of an attitude must be rooted in some fears of vulnerability, a lack of inner self-assuredness. But my clinical experience over the years has shown me that while such notions can be true, in our character-disturbed times, more often than not, this is not the case. More often than not, in our day and time, People's grandiosity is not rooted in deep fears of vulnerability and insecurity or an underlying poor self-image. Rather, too many people these days approach life with a deeply held perspective of superiority, with attitudes of entitlement stemming from that perceived superiority. Truly legends in their own minds. And sometimes they even have some objective things that they can point to that seem to confirm the notion. Maybe they've amassed a great deal of wealth or power, and they say to the world, see, I have it all figured out. I must be great. There is no room in their heart for anything bigger. And that is the core of their pathology. And as I mentioned before, when it comes to objective reality, that represents the ultimate higher power, something that they don't necessarily fear, but inherently detest. What's at the core of the pathology of the most malignant narcissists? Those that I call the aggressive personalities in most of my books. What lies at the core of their pathology is this pathological disgust for the notion of being subordinate to anything or anyone bigger, turning oneself over, being the true servant. Malignant narcissists want to be on top and in control all the time, and not necessarily because they fear otherwise. They simply like to dominate and feel entitled to do so because they feel special. Maybe others have even helped them solidify that feeling. And most of the time, their lying is reinforced in many, many ways and serves many purposes, which is why they do it so frequently and so unreservedly, even when it would seem to make sense not to. That's why we sometimes call it pathological lying, lying seemingly for the sake of lying, irrational lying, lying even when it would seem that the truth would suffice and perhaps even do better. Moreover, what often seems as madness is purely tactical. There's method to the madness. When I speak the lie with insistence and with apparent conviction, and I do it often enough, I might just succeed in convincing. I induce the gaslighting effect. And in extreme cases, I might even succeed in convincing myself, becoming truly delusional. There is method to the apparent madness of those who simply refuse to honestly reckon with truth and who are determined to have reality be what they say it is. And I'll have more to say about that and the gaslighting effect that engenders in upcoming editions of the new Character Matters program. I'm going to be taking some time off over the holidays, so I'll not be back for a few weeks. In addition to wishing all of you well over this wonderful holiday season, I do have one hope for the new year, and that is that we all do our part. I know I will do mine. I'm committed to it. That we all do our part to turn around what has been the scourge of our times, to rediscover not only the supreme importance importance of character, but to rediscover and to affirm the things that we have always known that we need to do to help instill it, to encourage it, to expect it, and especially to reinforce it. Character matters. It always has, and it always will. And when we give it the position of importance that it once had in our lives, and when we make it less easy for folks of reprehensible character to amass either power or wealth or influence, this age of entitlement and self-centeredness will come to a close and will usher in a new era of greater integrity. Let's all work toward that, shall we? And if you have a mind to, I would sincerely appreciate your embrace and recommendation of my latest efforts in those regards, especially my latest book, Essentials for the Journey, Embracing and Living the 10 Commandments of Character, Proven Principles, Time-Honored Principles to promote emotional, psychological, and spiritual well-being. So until the next time, thanks for tuning in. I'm Dr. George Simon. Be well.